What is the greatest comic book superhero movie ever made? I've pitted them all against each other in a March Madness style tournament bracket. For each matchup, some friends and I watch both films back to back, discuss the merits of each, argue about which one is better, and vote on the film that should move on to the next round. 128 films, covering 6 decades of cinema, and only one can be champion. Welcome to Superhero Movie Madness. The full tournament bracket, as well as the video explaining its creation, are linked in the description below this video. This episode's matchup is Swamp Thing versus X-Men Days of Future Past. The following discussion is immediately after watching these two films. Alright, I think this was a pretty good double feature we had lined up this evening. We watched Swamp Thing from 1982. And we watched X-Men Days of Future Past. I suppose
from 2014.
Well, yeah. Well, I it is
It's
from
the only
2014.
movie with that title.
Different time.
I suppose we can start by talking about the first movie we watched. Who's got some stuff to say about Swamp Thing?
Swamp Thing?
You cut
What's
out.
that?
You got a little loud there, and your mic said no.
It's a rough first.
It almost sounded
impression
like you
for
said
that
Swamp
opinion.
Thing fucks, which is, kind of accurate.
Yes,
Kinda
that is what I
accurate.
said.
Um,
The movie fucks so hard. It's so good. I mean, obviously it was made in 1982.
it was
It looks the
alright.
way it does. Nobody is dressed like they should be dressed for swamp excursions. But it fucks. It's
Except for
it fucks,
Rhombus,
it's
dude.
hot.
Except
It's
for
hot and
Rhombus.
it
Rhombus is ready for
fucks.
everything.
Yeah.
Rhombus
Except
still
for
didn't
getting
have
his
any
head crushed by the Swamp Thing.
fun.
Bro, I love when the villain was like, "Get me this Swamp Thing."
Yeah, they name dropped it a lot.
Oh,
But it was
man.
it was so good.
It was good. So it's the movie is directed by Wes Craven near the beginning of his career. It's after The Hills Have Eyes, but before Nightmare on Elm Street. It's very strangely not a horror film, given its director.
No.
And its title, frankly.
And true.
You'd think that a
certainly
movie
takes
about
some
Swamp Thing
things-
would be.
It certainly takes some things from horror.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like
Yeah.
you can see a lot of the influence, even outside of the topless scene.
Which it was a pretty good topless scene, I mean, what
It also seems to have taken a lot from like Bond films.
yeah, the
Mostly
villain
just
is
in the
very
villain, yeah.
James Bond
Yeah,
villain.
very Bond villainy.
Yeah. It said a little science gobbledygook, but not a lot, which was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, not terrible when it comes to, fake science being really bad. I mean, it was really bad. The fake science was really bad, but
It is.
it could have been really way worse.
It's
I
a
do-
strange film, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because there's some stuff in there that's like really good, right? Like Jude,
Jude.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
the entire character of Jude is excellent.
Right, and it's
yeah,
not
he
just
does not have a
fucking
line that
character.
does not hit really well.
yeah, and it's not
Yeah.
just that kid is killing it, which he is, right? It's also that like Jude is like written well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like better than like lots of other parts of the movie. It's very strange. Like,
Yeah.
Most
You
of
really
the rest
don't
of the movie.
expect- You really don't expect going into a superhero film that the child sidekick will be the best part.
yeah, but he sure
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they don't really have like a ton of. I mean, I guess I was gonna say just about Jude, but really none of them really have a ton of like character growth, or like there's a little bit there with Cable, Cable. What's
Yeah,
it,
it's a
Cable?
lot of static
Cable, yeah.
characters.
Yeah, there's no real lesson that Swamp Thing learns or whatever. It's just he's clearly changed from becoming Swamp Thing, and he is changed a lot by what happens to him. But what I'm saying is, it's not like a character growth kind of thing. It's just like his mind is enlightened from being Swamp Thing.
Yeah,
And
really
there's no
hate-
struggles from being Swamp Thing that he has to overcome or anything like that.
yeah,
really
and well,
hate
Swamp
opening up
Thing.
This chat and just seeing Karg.
Um,
Well,
Swamp
that's what the mutation of the final villain looks like, is Karg from the Masters of the Universe movie.
Yeah.
Swamp
Yeah,
Thing
full-
isn't the
full
main
Man-Bear Pig
character
action.
of
Yeah,
Swamp
no, it's
Thing.
definitely Cable.
No, he's
Yeah.
he's the horror villain who has a heart,
Yeah,
and the main character is Cable, who is the
Yeah.
main character of a horror villain. It's just kind of backwards.
Yeah, it's an interesting movie. I like that Man Bear Pig shows up at the end and fights Swamp Thing. I thought that was
Yeah,
cool.
I love
Bear
that they
Karg.
have a.
Yeah, Man Bear
I
Karg.
love that they just throw down and wrestle in the middle of the swamp.
Arg Bear Pig.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
more accurately Karg Bear Pig.
It's very clearly
Yeah.
like a super low budget movie.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't that wasn't helping it at all.
But like,
It
I don't
was-
know,
I
there's
mean,
certain
honestly-
qualities
Rough.
that the low budget brought that I kind of loved. Like
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
there were
I
these
think that
amazing wipe
visually,
transitions in the movie.
Yeah, that's
you know,
true.
I don't
Yeah.
think the wipes weren't for me.
I
Yeah.
loved them.
No,
Yeah.
you didn't
Were
like the
not for me.
explosion wipe.
I did
I-
not enjoy the wipes. I
After
don't
the
I
boat
will
think it helped it.
exploded.
The
two
only
boats.
visual, like, because you're watching an old movie, so you're pulled into that, like, okay, everything's gonna look a little old. So I honestly thought all of the visuals were fine, just dated, except for that scene where the Swamp Thing rips the roof off of a car and that just the wire work just lifts it straight up
Yeah.
into the air.
Yeah.
It just goes
That
away.
part was bad.
It kind
There
of
were-
seemed
there were-
like
Everything
you know,
else,
A lot
everything else
of
was
parts are
fine.
bad.
it seemed like
Um,
that stunt didn't go perfectly, and like it was like they only had the one chance to film it.
Yeah.
That's what it kind of felt
Yeah.
Probably because they tore the
Yeah.
roof off a car.
like. Yeah,
Right,
the
like
wipes,
it was
though.
I'm-
The wipes though, like
Yeah.
they're
Wipes-
great.
This might be-
I
this
don't know
might
what
be
you
a
have a
me
problem with the
issue.
wipes.
But this is like
Look,
this is like
a
peak
fucking
wipe
clock
technology,
wipe.
You know
right?
what?
a clock
You know
wipe,
what?
a white bordered clock wipe right after the villain gives a really fucking painfully hammy Bond villain soliloquy. Like
He does it like 4 times.
he does
He's
it
great.
so
He's
so
awesome.
much.
Yeah, I love
It,
Arcade.
it was
man.
not cheesy in the way I enjoyed.
You know what other movie has a bunch of cheesy wipe transitions?
Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Yeah. This is like people are really getting into wipes and being like, oh shit, we can do this now, right? So
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
And this movie came out like 5 years after episode 4.
yeah.
Yeah.
I will
So,
say
like-
though that like some of the wipes though, like I mean I enjoy all of the wipes for like campy kind of reasons. Like I laughed so hard when there was literally the star wipe in the middle, like from the center of
Yeah.
the screen. But
Like, honestly,
I don't
for the
think it
most
like
part, they
adds to the
weren't,
quality of the movie. It just adds to my
no.
enjoyment of the movie.
But I honestly don't think it detracted that much because I feel like I didn't really, I don't know, they didn't draw action away too much.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because there were some like transitions that I just didn't even notice.
Yeah, but the ones that are like wackier, like the star or even the squiggly line that they do a
Yeah.
few times, like if
The
I was
big,
watching this
bold,
movie trying to
in-your-face
enjoy it
clock wipe
for
got me.
completely unironic reasons, I could see those really being like pulling me out of it.
That's
It
fair.
just there were a couple things. There were the wipes. There were I mean, it was super low budget, yes, and I get that. And
And
I think
but
for
they.
years
boy,
old.
oh boy, did Man Bear Pig look fucking heinous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really think that they didn't put as much effort into that costume as they did into Swamp
course not.
Thing's costume because it wasn't gonna be on screen for nearly as long. But
Yeah, but it was
yeah,
like
it looked
super
pretty
shitty.
bad.
But they also
It was-
Is that-
it feels like they did do like a lot with whatever budget they had. I mean, there's some
Oh yeah.
like there's
They,
like
they
there's
did
some
the
good
best
like
with what they had.
stunt and effects work given the low
Yeah.
budget, right? Like there's the
Yeah,
fire
like,
scene where like
The fire scene's really
dude,
good.
where
Yeah.
where
There's like 20 explosions in that
where Alec
scene.
is like running on fire for like 20 seconds, and it's like
Yeah, dude.
it's
that fucking
it's
stunt
the
double
80s.
is-
That's just
A
a
lot of it-
stunt man who's been lit ablaze. Like
A lot of it feels
Yeah.
like they spent the vast majority of their budget, their everything budget, on just the beginning. And there wasn't a whole lot to go because the quality of like the props and basically everything noticeably took a nosedive right after that.
I guess I don't necessarily
I didn't notice it.
know what you mean.
Yeah,
Like
me
there
Costumes
are
were-
less like
it was-
props and stuff after the beginning because they're not in like a
Yeah.
science lab anymore.
Yeah, but even
I
like
feel
even like
you know,
during the dinner
setting is a lot
scene,
more normal after
the dinner
that.
scene, everything was very just it was noticeably cardboard, and
Was
there was a
it?
lot of there were like a lot of the tables and like the goblets were like really badly painted.
Did you guys all notice this?
I did not.
No.
So noticeably might be a little strong then.
Well,
I
noticeable.
noticed.
He noticed, so it was noticeable to somebody. Yeah.
Anyway, there was that. There was the fucking goblin thing.
I thought the goblin.
can't even
looked
remember
great,
his name.
dude.
The goblin
Bruno.
looked. The goblin
Was-
looked
yeah,
okay
little
for a
Bruno.
goblin. It looked okay for a goblin,
No.
but I'm
Little
just very
Bruno.
confused as to why there was a goblin at all.
Because Bruno on
It's
the
because it turned
inside
him
is a
into
goblin
his
man.
essence.
Yeah, I sort of.
In his essence, he is a small little man.
He's a
I am
he's a
sure
goblinkin.
He is. However, I don't think the movie would have. I don't think a single thing would have turned out differently had he just died and turned into a tree or something.
Yeah, I think that.
I don't know.
Like,
I
I'm
think it was
kinda-
great that
No,
he turned
because
into a
him
little goblin.
turning- Okay, him turning into his like inner essence is what drives Arcane to try the substance himself because he thinks so highly of himself. He thinks that it will turn him into this like
Megamind.
all-powerful being.
Yeah, but it
That
turns him into Man Bear
motivation-
Pig.
Well, I'm kind
Right,
of with
but
Chris
without
on
that
this one. Just
motivation,
that,
I don't think he would have been convinced to do that.
Well, I mean, I don't think that those things are necessarily like mutually exclusive, though. Like, because I personally, it was weird to me that like this like plant derivative, formula that like made plants grow and everything like that, which turned our guy into Swamp Man, would turn these other two guys into just like weird other things.
Well-
I sort of feel like this all would have made more sense if he was like a little fucking stump gremlin, and then and then the bad guy turned into like a big scary tree monster or something. It's like
well, the
keep it
formula
on theme. I feel like would have made more sense.
Well, the formula didn't just like make plants happen, right? Like the reason it made plants grow out of the floor is because the floor was made of wood. So
Mhm.
like trees were growing out of the floor.
So then did swamp like why
Why
our
did he
guy
turn
turn into
into a
swamp
swamp
because
thing?
he's
Because he
swamping
was
hard?
Because he was in the swamp.
Sure, but then I don't
Like
know.
like
then
literally
I feel like
he
there
was
should
in
have.
the
I
water
think-
and
I
the
No,
think
mud.
I
the-
get that, but but like I feel like that wasn't necessarily communicated as well as it could have been, because when they explain why Bruno turns into a little goblin, they're like, oh, it's just like what's on the inside. But then you're left to wonder, like, oh, I thought you turned into swamp because swamp, not because like shouldn't
Well, I think
shouldn't some of the environmental factors of where you are now then affect what you turn into? I mean, I get that they were just in a house.
I mean like
so.
yeah, like what environmental factors? Like air? Like
No, I know. I'm just saying that there's
what is
something
he
here that
immersed
doesn't.
in besides the atmosphere of ground level,
Well, the way written, nothing. But I'm just saying there's something that doesn't quite line
Right, it's
up
like,
here
would-
with why
would it
does
have
he turn
turned
into
out-
Gremlin? Why does he
right.
turn into Pigman?
Would
Because
he
we
have,
know
you
why
know,
he turns into Swamp Man, but we
would
don't
would
know
either
where.
of them have turned into a different creature, even just visually, if they had done so inside the swamp?
I guess so,
Right,
yeah.
no.
They would have turned
Probably.
into a swamp
Or like,
version of
or like while
themselves.
holding a table, a
Yeah.
house plant.
Right. I
Well,
don't know.
'cause-
I
'cause,
just
right,
think it would
'cause-
have taken me out of it a little bit less if they
'cause
were at least
Alec
kind of planty themed.
turns
because it was
into
like
a strong, compassionate, horny boy, and that's who he was on the inside. But then also he was in the swamp, and that's why he's
Yeah.
Swamp Thing,
sure.
He was on the inside a strong.
The explanation for the
compassionate, horny
serum-
boy.
Yeah,
The
is that an
explanation for the
incorrect
serum
assessment of the
isn't
character?
any of that. The explanation for the serum is that it brings out your
Yeah.
inner essence.
Yeah.
And I'm just having a hard time reconciling that his inner essence is also a plant.
No. He
Yeah.
was immersed in the swamp while the formula was
Yeah, but you're
Exploding a
assuming
bunch.
that based on
Yeah,
that making
but,
much
like,
more
the movie-
sense than what they
The
say.
explanation they give you is that it brings out your inner essence. And I you can make that logical you can connect the dots there, but it's just I don't know. I feel like the movie doesn't explain it on its own well enough.
I don't know.
I'm kind of with you on that. It doesn't really take me out of it quite to the same extent that it seems like it does for you, but like
I just look when I see a little goblin man jumping around and going from being the big dumb thug to the zippy little goblin.
Yeah.
that kind of it takes me out of it.
I thought that
It,
was
al-
so
it
great.
also
Watch your feet.
it was a weird energy
Yeah.
too, because I feel like the first few shots of Bruno in the movie kind of set him up like he's going to be more compassionate. Like, what
Yeah,
was
like
the whole
he's
point of him putting the locket on the plant if that wasn't, if he turned out to just be like a
I,
snivelly little coward in the end,
I'm
and
okay
that
with
was
that
his
because he
character trait.
does wind up helping them in the end, so
Exactly,
it
yeah.
does
True,
set up
that's
that
fair.
turn. That didn't bother me. It just the
Yeah.
whole big strong boy named Bruno suddenly becoming a tiny goblin, and then I don't know. It kind of took me out of it.
There's this
His
thing
clothes shrank with him.
the movie does that
True.
that like you would think you could take for granted in films, but we know based on a lot of these movies we've been watching and also based on a lot of movies that have come out in the last like 10-15 years, is you can't take this for granted. And the film, it had like a logical progression of events occur,
Yes.
which you might be like, that's a story, and like I agree, but a lot of movies don't have like a story. It turns out.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like that was doing something for me. The fact that it was like this happened, and that causes the next thing, which causes the next thing, which causes the next
Well,
thing, and I was
you
like,
see-
that's great. That's so satisfying.
You
Like,
see, in the first couple seconds of the movie, we got as much story as we got in an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes of Fantastic Four.
that's true.
In there being an opening, just
Event, yeah.
yeah, a thing happened, and we were told about it.
Yep.
Another thing that was kind of fucking me up, and this isn't the movie's fault, this is purely my fault, and maybe it was messing someone else up too. I don't know. The Arcane's secretary looked so fucking similar to Alex's sister that I
To
was like, what the
Linda?
fuck is going on?
Yeah,
it
I
looks
thought
so
that for a
goddamn
second,
similar.
too.
I thought that was going to be Linda, who was secretly a
Yeah,
spy.
I thought
the
that
whole
was going to
time.
be a thing, and I was
But
waiting
no,
for
she
it
was
the
a
whole
different
time.
character
It was
with a different personality.
completely different person that they just happened to look similar.
She also had a British
Also-
accent.
Hey, people can fake accents.
I will say, like, I agree with you, Eddie, about like, I enjoy that, like, there was nothing about the movie that I felt like was that much of a logical leap.
Yeah.
Like, it all made sense. It all followed. That being said, I do feel like it got pretty meandering a lot at times. Like I was
definitely
forgiving it a
agree.
little. I was forgiving it
Yeah.
because I'm like, okay, like whenever I'm watching an older movie, I kind of just like inherently accept that it's not going to meet
Yeah,
my,
the pacing's going to be slower.
yeah, right.
Right.
So it's
And
like
they
I'm
don't
just
have
like,
a whole lot of budget to work with, so they're going to be filling things out a lot more. And
Right,
Yeah, I do
exactly.
Paced like The Hills
specifically.
Have Eyes, if you could believe that.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
feel like like it feels like they probably put together a cut of the movie and we're like, damn, the movie's not long enough and we can't
this is
go
a
back
half-hour
out.
special.
We can't
Yeah.
go back out into the swamp.
I will say, for
because
as
there are
meandering,
like some like long establishing shots of swampland, and it's like, okay, I get
Yeah.
it. Go. Like,
Yeah.
I will say, for as meandering as it was at times, the fucking boat action scene was
it was
kind
fun.
of awesome.
Yeah,
When
I mean,
Rhombus had his
like,
30 cal.
yeah,
they didn't
yeah.
understand how grenades worked, but it was kind
Okay,
of awesome. Like,
For the viewers at home, there's one character that looks like Rambo, and I made the joke that, oh, it's discount Rambo, Rhombus.
and we were
Yes.
calling him Rhombus
So we're not
the whole
just
movie.
so we're not just fucking out of context calling a dude Rhombus.
Well, I
Although
think
to be
that
fair,
anybody
his
that watched Swamp Thing-
actual name is Ferret, so it's not that
This is
much
better.
stranger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that anybody who watched Swamp Thing could have put together that we are making fun of Ferret
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
he very
But if
clearly
you
looks like
haven't
Rambo.
watched,
People
if
don't.
you
people don't
haven't
have to
watched
watch
Swamp
everything.
Thing,
So here's what I
Um,
will say about Swamp Thing, though. Given Chris is talking about the meandering pace is a little bit forgivable. I think that I would definitely recommend checking out Swamp Thing, but if you could check it out with friends, do that instead.
It's
Yeah.
way better with
Yeah.
friends.
Like, I think
Yeah.
you'll have a good time watching it, but I've seen this movie before and I liked it. I had a way better time watching it
Fine,
tonight with you
leave it.
guys.
Well, yeah, because
I would not have enjoyed this I don't
by
think I would have
itself.
really enjoyed this at all if
Yeah.
I was watching it alone.
Well, because
I would have enjoyed Swamp
the
Thing
meandering pace allows for lots of, built-in pauses, so you can be talking about things without talking over dialogue, as is the case with most of the other movies that we
True,
watch.
true.
As was the
Yeah.
case with the next movie, Days of Future Past.
Very
which
true.
I think
Whoa,
Chris
did
is
we
going to
just
vote for, and I'm a
transition?
little upset about
Whoa,
it.
I just fucking nailed a segue.
That was great, man. No,
And we
actually,
ruined it.
I
Holy
think
shit.
I don't know, man. I think tonight's a kind of a close one. I'm really not
Yeah.
sure how I think the vote's gonna go. So let's
Really?
talk about the second movie. X-Men Days of Future Past. We are
I need to
accidentally
check our fucking
watching
bracket.
the X-Men films in reverse order.
Sorry.
So who
No, because I
who
think
wants
we're
to
still
kick?
going to watch Dark Phoenix last.
We did skip Dark Phoenix
Fuck.
in this reverse order.
Ugh.
But who wants to kick things off with this one?
I will.
I
It's
like
a
it.
it's
Okay,
a
go ahead.
I like
beast
it.
of a film.
Mm.
I see what you did.
Yeah.
I wasn't
I-
meaning to pun, but I sure did.
I remember it being a lot worse than it actually is.
It's a pretty
Yeah.
okay film.
I
will
remember
say-
really hating it, and having
I-
watched it again, I enjoyed it.
I remember loving it, and I still love it.
there's there's a lot about this movie that I think is really entertaining, and there are some sort of like core conceits of it that really bother me.
Uh-huh.
Like the
Mm.
entire there's something like
The whole premise
even-
is borked. Like
well, even ignoring like all of the individual things, of which there are, I would say, a considerable amount in the film of things that don't make a tremendous amount of sense.
Mhm.
It's always going to carry the even if all of that was perfect, it's always going to carry this baggage with it of the purpose of this movie is to nonsensically reboot the X-Men universe into allowing these new movies to divert from the original trilogy
Yeah.
instead of just rebooting the universe
Yeah.
non-canonically,
just,
which I
just
always
doing a hard reboot, yeah.
yeah, which is
Yeah.
just it's so silly, and I think it's it's sort of like the entire movie inherently is kind of some sort of prequel setup or a sequel setup, because it's
Yeah.
it's the and I will say that the movie doesn't necessarily drip of that in feeling it feels like its own narrative, and it feels like it has its own story to tell and stuff like that. That being said, the other part about the movie is that a lot of the sort of core setups for the things that they want to exist in the movie just don't make a bunch of sense. Like the whole idea of oh, they want Professor X to not have his powers and want him to be able to use his legs. So the explanation for that is just he's got a drug that Beast whipped up that somehow heals his spinal injury, but also gets rid of his mutant powers.
and does
Yeah.
And
both
still-
entirely temporarily.
Yeah,
I feel like it makes a little bit of sense, but they just explain it poorly.
I don't
Yeah, but I don't know. It's sort of like they drift past it so quickly that
If
that,
there's
they
if there's
expect-
a miracle drug that fixes
Marnie,
his
stop.
spine, why does it stop working? later?
The thought
Yeah.
the concept
Why
of
does
it
it
is that
wear
it's a
off?
gene therapy, so it's affecting his DNA, and it's
but-
it's
But
wild.
how
It's a
does
little
that
bit
affect a
it's
traumatic spine injury?
yeah, it's
yeah.
not
I'm not a fan of
Bueno.
that.
Like
and it seems like
maybe
a
if his-
CinemaSins critique.
Maybe if his condition had been
what
something he
seems
was
like a
born with.
CinemaSins critique?
Right.
the I don't like how this thing works.
No,
they
no,
also
no,
explain
wait,
that it's
hold up, hold
derived
up. It's
It,
not-
it seems more like a nitpick than
I
than
don't
the
know
rest
that
of
it
it. They just
is
needed
a
an excuse
nitpick.
for him to not have his powers, and they decided to move it on to he can walk at the same time.
Hold up. I don't
Yeah.
know that it is a nitpick, because they give us an explanation for
integral
how
to
it
the
works
plot.
that doesn't make
Yeah.
sense.
big plot point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, they could have had a different thing be why he doesn't have his powers. He could have used his power on himself to go into his mind palace and lock his psychic abilities away.
Yeah.
Right?
There are
He could have
ways to
done
write
he could have
this.
done
Yeah,
some
right.
psychic shit where there's no science explanation, so there's no way to be that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Instead it really
Or
it-
I
so-
mean, they also could have just used the fact that he was depressed as a way of
his powers aren't working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
he's taking some drug
If-
because he's depressed, which mess with his powers,
could have
and he
just had
still
him
has
be
to be in a
a
If you
wheel.
wheelchair.
follow,
And he could have
if
been
you
in a
follow
wheelchair,
a couple
yeah.
of logical leaps, The serum is derived from the serum that Beast uses to control his beastliness. And
Yeah, they
it,
could've
it
just
makes
said
a little
like,
bit of sense that because the serum is designed to help you control your body better, that maybe it's doing something along the lines of healing, at least temporarily, his spinal injury.
I
But
almost
that's
wish
a
that
lot
they
of fucking logical leaps to
Right,
make
I almost wish they
Also,
for
just fucking
something
left
that
it.
is just a plot device.
They coulda just left it as this suppresses your mutant ability.
yeah. I
Temporarily
just
suppresses your mutant ability,
Yeah, they
and
could have left it at that too.
he doesn't wanna hear people's brains, he's been through a lot of shit.
yeah.
Yeah,
He doesn't
But
wanna
Yeah.
hear
if
other
they did
people.
that, they really wanted to hammer home the like
That it was
DNA point
heroin?
for some
Yeah.
reason.
Well, I think that
Um,
they wanted to present it as like a choice between he either gets to use his legs and or use his
Yeah.
mind, but that's not really like there's not really
Not
much
a
of him
good
choosing
choice.
between that because it's really more that he just doesn't want to be using his mind and they didn't want to like write scenes so that it would be okay for him to
Yeah.
be in a wheelchair in them. Which is like that's the main thing. I'm fine with him taking something to like make his mind not work. I just
yep.
think that it would have made a lot more sense and especially followed better from the previous movie since the big thing at the end was that he lost his legs. To have him actually have to be in a wheelchair in this movie, I
It's
think would have just
Have
super
to deal with
it's
that.
yeah,
super
it would
weird
have
that he's
just
not just
been
in a
better.
wheelchair.
Because that would have been even better thing of him, like, dealing with this traumatic life event,
yeah.
and then not
There's
wanting to
also
add other people's trauma on top of it.
there's also
Of course.
the imagery and the sort of theme they're going where he's embracing being Professor X.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just I
And the
think
wheelchair is a big part of that, and I don't think it really had to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it
Well, and
didn't.
this goes along with why I don't think it's a nitpick is because it is foundational to the arc that the character is supposed to be
Yeah.
going on in the film. The thing that is foundational to this arc doesn't make sense. So I
Well, it's
don't
because
think
it
that's a
doesn't have anything to do
nitpick.
with his legs, you know?
Yeah. And yeah, I agree. Like he could have just been taking a drug for not wanting to have his powers. He could be dealing with chronic pain from his now spinal injury, like
yeah.
I
yeah.
mean,
But like,
this is
okay,
also
so
the same
to be
universe
fair,
that
right?
has
Like,
giant robots that can detect
Right.
DNA at range and
In
a ton of
1970.
other super science. So
Yeah, it's also
Wait a
I'm
minute.
willing to give
At
it.
the end of
I'm
um
willing to give that.
at the end of Apocalypse, when those robots walk out of the wall, are those fucking Sentinels?
oh,
at
maybe.
the
End
end
of
of
Is that what we're
Apocalypse,
supposed to think when we see those in the
Wait,
training?
what?
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess they're
Oh,
like
Yeah,
no, I don't
those
think
repurposed
so.
sentinels.
They look a
Kind
lot
of.
more like the original like comic book Sentinels
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
these.
Well,
They
because
I feel
also
like it's
in
supposed to be like a nod to it and not necessarily Sentinels as Sentinels. This
yeah,
is like
Well,
very
yeah, I
far
mean,
off
they're
topic
I
though.
clearly,
mean,
like,
but
I
part
also
don't
of
know if
in
the
that's that
training,
all robots
um,
kind of look alike.
program, but, like, they're just wait. I guess we missed that for what was supposed to be a cool nod to the movie before this, not that any nod to the movie before Apocalypse would be cool. Um, uh, because we watched them out of order.
well, because it's
Um,
Maybe.
also a nod to X-Men 3 because they in their training simulation
Yeah,
and they fight Sentinels in the training
I
yeah.
don't know if
simulation in
it's
the
Yeah.
third
just
one.
that, like, big robots all kind of look
Well,
similar.
Yeah,
certainly in
it's
this
also,
universe.
Yeah.
in the end of this movie, the very
hmm
end, before the credits, when when
uh,
Wolverine is just walking through the school and seeing everyone happy and everybody's grown up and his
Yeah,
teachers, and it
back in
felt like they were
in
setting it up so
2020.
that they could do more X-Men movies without the past nonsense,
Yeah, it's very all
Mhm.
because they brought
strange.
back every actor except for Beast.
I don't
yeah, but
think
probably
that
just for
I
cameos,
don't
not
think it
really
was
like
supposed to
Yeah,
be a setup. I think it was supposed to be like a send off. Like, hey, look,
like a
yeah,
retirement.
Mhm.
the cast of the previous series, they're all happy now. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's what it was
Yeah.
supposed to be.
And it's setting up the current stuff with uh Charles basically telling Wolverine what had happened.
Is
I
that
Yeah.
supposed to be the framing of the rest of the movies?
No, I
I
guess
It,
it's
oh
also supposed
interesting.
to show you like, hey, now the past people, this is where and how they're gonna end up. Which
yeah.
notably,
Yeah.
Mystique is not there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, she Eddie, she
You know, the
uh,
main character of the movie.
hey guys, do I have to spoil?
Does she die in Dark
Sh-
Phoenix? I didn't see
Yeah,
it.
guys
Oh,
in
all
Dark
right.
Phoenix.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because they got
Yeah.
tired of
Of
what's her
Jennifer
face?
Lawrence.
Us.
I can't
Okay,
imagine
well,
how.
let's
I
talk
know.
more about Days of Future Past. I have
I
similar feelings about it that I do for Swamp Thing. I think I feel like there's some no, I feel like there's some really strong parts of the movie, and then
Yeah.
there's
Mhm.
also a lot of parts that are not that strong.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
will say like something that I didn't realize I missed so much until watching this movie versus watching Apocalypse is I take the young cast a lot more seriously when Wolverine is around, like interacting with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Like, because like I even and my opinion might have changed in this because it's been a while since I've watched First Class, but like, see, he's not present in that movie either, and it does feel like a bit more like I think that's a better movie than all the ones that follow it, but like it
Mhm.
does sort of feel like a totally different kind of thing. Whereas this one is like it roots you into like what you know and really makes these two
Yeah.
universes, which are allegedly the same one, feel more believable together, even though there's so much about the prequel movies that just like totally defy any
Mhm.
connection to the originals.
Well, the other
um
things that First Class kind of has going for it is that it at that time did not purport to be connected to the like original series of
Yeah.
films. It was just
well,
like
no,
presumably a reboot.
huh.
Like
I,
his
I mean,
Days
I
of
guess
Future
I don't
Past,
know.
this is the film that connects those two timelines.
Yeah.
I thought that there were, well, I don't know. Maybe I was just assuming that at the time because, it was just talking about they're using the same like effect for Mystique and, you know.
Well, no,
Mhm.
sure. It like doesn't necessarily have to be separate
No, it
from
doesn't
it,
necessarily have to be. I'm just saying that
but there's nothing
that
about
felt
it.
like the assumption at the time
Hmm.
because there is stuff that contradicts in First Class, which
It's been
I'll
a
talk
long time
about
since
more
I've
once
seen
we
it.
watch First Class for
Yeah.
this.
So
But
this movie,
yeah,
a lot of like, I mean, all the actors do a really good job.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, it's like I've forgotten kind of like how it's like, yeah, actually, Jennifer Lawrence can play a good Mystique when it's in a better movie than Apocalypse or Dark Phoenix.
It's
Like,
too bad they didn't let anyone else play a good Mystique
yeah,
to
really.
Yeah.
prove that she was Mystique.
I feel like this was an okay okay at best
Yeah, it
Mystique.
would have been
I don't
nice
know
if
Yeah,
that I would
other
go
okay
so
at
far
actors
best,
to say
got
but
she
to
was
way
play
better
good.
Mystique
compared
in
to
this movie.
Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, much better than Apocalypse.
It's really
Mhm.
weird that Mystique almost never uses her power.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind
No,
of
what are you
Yeah.
bothers
talking about?
me.
She changes her hairstyle so much.
And sometimes she changes from Jennifer Lawrence to blue Jennifer Lawrence. Like
Yeah.
Fuck.
and then very occasionally she becomes
She's a
another
dude.
person.
She's
But only at the very beginning and very end of the movie,
but
and
only
also in
if
the
it's
panic
and
room.
only if it's a man. And only in a
So
military uniform.
I feel like
Oh, she
I mean,
turned into
A lady
she
with
does
an
turn into the
afro
black
for
chick
about
once.
30 seconds.
Yeah,
Right in
the
front
most
of everyone, so
conspicuous.
no one could possibly be convinced by the
Yeah.
Yeah, and
disguise.
yeah.
it's not like anyone's standing within 30 feet of her, so why would anyone know that it was her?
Very
She's
strange.
standing in front of a
well,
police barricade by herself.
I mean, at that point,
Jesus.
she's been shot and everyone's looking at her and
Yeah, but
she's
I
just
don't know
trying to
that it
get away
makes it
from
any better.
Magneto's. She's just trying to get away from Magneto. So, I mean, she's just kind of desperate to do something at
Right,
that
but she
point.
doesn't walk towards the other people.
Right,
She just
yeah. Or
continues to
pick
walk
like
into
a
empty space.
and also
So
picks
funny.
like probably the most conspicuous person in the crowd
Yeah,
Yeah.
to turn into.
So like given that Mystique can like when she transforms can like turn her skin into fabric and stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, she
yeah.
creates a bunch of stuff. Why couldn't she heal the bullet wound?
Well, no. I don't need her to heal the bullet wound, but why didn't she
Need a
transform into
bandage.
herself, but it looks like the bullet wound is in her head and then play dead?
Oh.
Yeah. I'm not saying this
Or
is a
just like
problem with the movie. I was just kind of goofing a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be
Anyway,
kind
There
of
are a lot
sick,
of
though.
applications of Mystique's power that they just didn't do because it gave
Yeah.
Jennifer Lawrence more screen time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's probably down to the studio more than Jennifer Lawrence herself. I think they're like, well, we
Yeah.
paid for this big name, we're gonna use it, you know?
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that is a
It's just a
problem where they
shame.
paid for the big name to be the shapeshifter.
Exactly,
Yeah.
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 And then they forgot that she was a shapeshifter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
like
it's a
the
whole energy.
plot and characters and stuff.
Yeah.
What are we thinking?
I wish that there was like build up in other movies to suddenly the world is awful for everyone because mutants
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah.
Especially when the other X-Men movies were slowly building towards the world is getting better for mutants due to the constant struggle and clash of ideas.
And
Yeah,
like the vaccine or
I
whatever
will
that
say
they
it
could
And the
is-
choose to take.
vaccine and like
Yeah.
there were lots of things moving towards like things getting better over time despite all the struggle they were going through because that's like the point
yeah.
is that X-Men
Yeah.
is a hopeful story.
Right.
And they were just
Yeah.
like, well, none of it worked because of
Yeah.
something in 1973 that we couldn't have done anything about.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's
that is
also
kind of rough.
And I'm not happy
don't-
about that as like a fan of the movies.
Yeah.
Of
They
the
don't
original three, yeah.
well, the original
really
three
explain
have
why this is this specifically is the only turning point.
yeah.
Mm.
The
Yeah,
original
and
three
it's also-
have a benefit. I mean, benefit is like a maybe too strong a word because obviously this is a choice that the writers made. Where like before the first movie starts, people know about mutants and it's like a thing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right? And so they can just establish like this is kind of the tone and tenor around this whole situation. Whereas like in the past movies, it's like, okay, now people suddenly know about mutants. And it's like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, so what happens?
Sure,
well, we
but-
skip 10 years and everybody fucking hates them, dude. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
and it's
I-
like, oh, I
I-
kind of would have liked to see what got us there. Yeah, but we had to skip 10 years so that the actors would
other
all be
issue is-
inappropriately
I
aged.
don't know.
The other
I
issue
think
is
I
that
would've-
Damn it.
No, it's
It
kind
always
of.
comes back to the actors are the wrong fucking age and they refuse to fix it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jenica,
that's
what were you
true.
going to say?
I wish that this was the first of the reboot.
Yeah.
That
think
would be
fix a
so
lot of the
interesting, I
problems.
think.
It would
is
make
that-
more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we didn't have anything else before then, they could use. I mean, we first of all we get the connection and that really strong acting from Hugh Jackman, right?
Mhm.
To like help
he's
set
so
up these
good.
characters and how
Yeah.
they relate to each other and how like because that's what we got the most from him is like setting up relationships, right? He was really good at bringing out like how do you feel about other people.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
wouldn't have to worry about as much about continuity because again, we're resetting everything now.
From that point.
So we
right.
don't have right from this point, they whatever moment they choose can be more like monumental. Like they get to decide like, is this when people find out about mutants? And that's the turning point we're gonna pick, which would make more sense.
Yeah.
Where like,
It's just
I
a
don't
th-
know.
It's a thing
Because like
where
why didn't they go back? You know what I mean? Like if this is the order that we're having it, why didn't they go back 10 more years to when they found out about mutants? Why didn't they go back 10 more years to when they killed all of Mystique's friends?
Yeah,
why didn't they
right.
go
Why not-
back
why
not
would they
and
kill-
kill
prevent
Trask as
Magneto?
a baby? Like,
Or why
Right,
wouldn't
why
they
would they
go
not
back
go
and
back?
just prevent Magneto from being in the Holocaust, right? Like,
Right.
Like, why
Or go
didn't
back and,
they
like-
go back to maybe just more than a few days before she does the thing
Right.
so that they can talk to her about it?
Right.
Mhm.
Or just like or
Yeah,
Instead
just
of-
maybe
save her
get to her
friends.
before she's already like
in
Because
Paris.
that's her thing.
traumatized and
That's the thing with Mystique in this movie is it's not they make a point to say it. She doesn't give a shit about mutants' rights. She just cares about her friends that got killed, which is
Yeah.
fine, and I don't have a problem with that. But then go back 10 more years and save her friends.
yeah, which
And
then she's
not gonna
effectively
go
saves her
Right, not gonna kill
from
that,
the
not gonna
trauma
cause
and
all of this
emotional
track
distress.
issue. Like
and
there's
like
so many
you know, I get that like there just wouldn't be a movie if they did the thing
Right.
that would make more
which
sense.
is why
but
I wish that like this was the beginning of the reboot.
Yeah.
Because I think
Right.
it would have been much more interesting. And then you can build off of like, well, here's the new future that we've created and like do it more of a build up again.
yeah.
Instead
also-
of having to like double around
But
and like bounce
also-
around decades. Like it could be in the same decade. They wouldn't have to bounce around.
The whole
Right.
existence of this film and it being necessarily tied to the other series, like,
Yeah.
I mean, it kind
saying
of makes it
if you're gonna tie it.
impossible to do sequels to this film, right? Like,
Yeah. Right.
And so like that's why you have like all this weirdness in Apocalypse
Yeah.
and presumably Dark Phoenix, which I haven't seen yet. Um and it's also like, hey, because we had most of the iconic X-Men characters in the original series of films. If they're now going to be in this series of films, uh we have to break continuity and have them be aged wrong,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's true.
Doesn't
None
make
of the
sense.
like age timelines make
Right.
sense.
yeah.
No,
There's
I
like
And
mean,
this
no
not
is
even
the
Holocaust
consideration.
survivor in 1983,
Yeah, like
Magneto.
there was
But
no
like,
consideration for like what characters already existed at what
yeah.
age. Like there was just no thought was given to the continuity of characters aging.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, this one is really where it starts to set that up too, where it starts to put characters like who are never, they can kind of write themselves out of it by saying that they never actually called this character who shows up in the background Toad, right? But he
Mhm.
clearly is Toad, but not the
Right.
Yeah.
same Toad that was in X-Men 1.
Yeah, it's a
Like
Yeah.
different
stuff like
guy with the
that.
same powers, I
Yeah.
guess. Like,
Who
Right.
like
It's like
looks like a more
there are
comic
enough.
accurate Toad. And it's like, and I think there's more of that in Apocalypse with like Angel and Nightcrawler,
Yeah.
but you know,
I feel like there are
I
enough
think the
X-Men.
other,
They could have found some more.
yeah, right.
Could have
Like
found some more
the
X-Men.
other the other big issue really with me for me with this one is like, yeah, we can talk about how like, the time travel would have made more sense if they went further back or recontextualize it, right? But like
Yeah.
even the way that like even if you push past that, the way that they set up like the whole crux of the like goal doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Because like they say at the beginning that the thing is that they capture Mystique and get her DNA, and that's what allows them to make
Yeah.
the like super crazy Sentinels, right?
yeah.
And so
Mm.
they have to go stop her from trying to kill Trask so that she doesn't get captured and get her DNA. And they
Yeah.
do that. They stop her, but then Magneto shoots her, and they end up getting her DNA anyway from the blood off the street. So
Mhm.
okay, they've already gotten the DNA, which was the thing that they said was the big thing. But then in the story, they transition it to the big thing being like Mystique's choice to kill Trask
Mhm.
because like it's made a big deal of the fact that like
Yeah.
people see her do it on live
As like
television.
public opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but also like
Well,
people see Magneto lift an entire fucking stadium and go and try to
Yeah.
kill Trask and fail, and people see Magneto successfully have the ability to kill Trask and then just decide not to at the last second. I feel like that wouldn't change the public opinion that much
Well,
versus
maybe it
whether she does
would.
it successfully or not. I don't
Like, maybe it
know.
would have changed, like, popular public opinion, but it
I
would
mean, I
not have
guess.
changed the security defense department's
well, it's
opinion.
also this
Right, but it's also like they
strange.
didn't present it like, oh, Trask was made into a martyr or anything. And it didn't present it like, oh, then Mystique went on down some slippery slope path that turned her into some tyrant that contributed to this. It's like, no, it's just a matter of whether or not they had the tech to make the Sentinels, right? So it's
Mhm.
like the whole
Yeah.
public
Well,
opinion thing is like,
they do kind of
They say in
cover
the
their
movie that
asses a little
Trask
bit with that.
needs,
Yeah.
He needed more than a little bit of blood they could scrape off the pavement.
yeah,
yeah,
he
that's
Yeah.
needed
true.
her like spinal fluid and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
Which is also wild because like she's alive in the original trilogy. So
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, and they showed
So
us
she
that all of
somehow
his mutant
escaped. Yeah.
research subjects were dead and autopsied.
you're
Except
right, yeah.
apparently
Yeah.
Mystique, yeah. Well, actually,
Yeah,
though, to be
except
fair, I
apparently Mystique.
suppose, in the timeline where that happened, Trask is dead, right?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
I
someone
guess.
Someone else is
else
Somebody
doing
else.
doing the research on Mystique's
Yeah,
mutation.
Yeah.
Let's also not talk about the fact that Trask actually was in the original trilogy as a completely different actor. But I guess they could just have the same name,
Yeah. Well,
even
the
though they're
other
still
thing too
really
that's
supposed to be the same
weird
character.
is the way this film is set up is it's like Trask knows about mutants like before most people and really doesn't like them and like is trying to get people to agree to like his Sentinel program. And then I guess in the bad timeline, his death is what makes people agree that they should do his Sentinel program. So I guess he
Yeah.
must have left really detailed notes, like that they were
Yeah.
like
Right.
that
Well,
they
he
And
were
was
still
also,
he
able
like,
to
was a
do the
corporate man,
program.
Well,
so
and also it somehow took them 50 years to develop it. That's what's getting me.
I mean, that
Yeah.
makes more sense. It taking them 50
Right, but they
years to make
have it
murder
they, like,
robots, yeah,
basically have them in this movie. Like, they
yeah,
basically
makes
have
more
them.
they
sense
didn't
than yeah.
have they didn't have the ones that
the good
adapt
ones.
perfectly to any given scenario
Yeah.
using mutant abilities. They just had some
but
big
still,
plastic robots.
but
But
still,
it's also just wild, right?
where
Because
were they? Where were the mutant tracking plastic robots
right, and
Yeah,
also
for the
like
rest of everything.
for the rest of X-Men? Yeah.
right, like it wasn't really implied that the decision to reveal this now was affected by them going back in time, right? Which means that the characters that go on to be in the original trilogy, like, like Wolverine, or, he wasn't that involved at this point, but like Professor X or Magneto or Mystique or whatever, like
Should have
would have
known about the Sentinel
should have known
program.
about the Sentinels and been able to
Yeah.
like, stop
Do
Prevent
this
something
it.
before
else.
it got bad. Right.
It's
Yeah.
really weird that Magneto would ostensibly know about the Sentinel program
And
and
not bring
wouldn't
it
be
up
like, "Well,
ever.
I'm gonna hunt down the secret lab and destroy it." Like,
Yeah.
Well, and also not use it as a recruitment tool.
Yeah. Like it would
yeah.
have been more of a conversation in the original trilogy. It
Yeah.
It's
retroactively
also
makes
like
it make less sense, which is
Yeah.
never
A
something that I
shame.
like.
there's this thing
Yeah.
in the you know, in the original series of films and in a lot of popular iterations of X-Men. I don't know every iteration of X-Men,
Mm.
but like where Magneto, like it's it's really reasonable that he has arrived at the position he's at, but he's
Yes.
just wrong, right? Like, and that's the thing, right? Is that like the idea is that like, yes, all the things that Magneto have made you arrive at this position are true. Your conclusion is wrong, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's what makes him
Magneto has
interesting.
never done anything wrong
Right.
ever in his life,
Um,
and
He
I love
sure
him.
has. He tried to kill
Well,
Rogue
Well,
in the
that's what
first
makes
movie.
right. So,
that's what
but like
makes
that's the thing
Magneto
with
versus Professor X
it's
interesting.
very
Is that they have the
compelling
Mhm.
exact same
information and
exact same
similar
information.
circumstances,
Yeah, exactly. Similar stuff,
but they have different
except that
conclusions.
Professor X goes for the hopeful, we can teach people to be better, and Magneto goes for let's just kill them and be done with
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
What I think
right.
is a shame
Which
You
is
about
know,
this movie
interesting.
is that even though they say the contrary a lot, like in the future timeline, ostensibly the plot of this movie does prove Magneto right,
Well,
Yeah.
but
which
so
Mhm.
this is what
is
I
a
was
shame.
this is what I was gonna
Yeah.
say was that
Well, it's like, one of them has hope for humanity and
the
the other doesn't.
these
And that's
Yeah.
prequel movies or reboot movies, like they don't really kind of like set it up as like, oh, Magneto has the wrong conclusions. They kind of set it up as like he's just kind of a bastard who like,
I don't
just
know.
Well,
keeps
to be
like he
fair,
keeps having
He's a
character
hot
arcs that
asshole.
make him realize that maybe he should be a good guy, and then he's like, nah, I'll be a bad guy.
well,
Like
I mean, to
Yeah,
be
it
fair,
kind of
in the original
pulls.
trilogy, it is kind of set up that like Magneto is kind of full of shit, right? And that he's also, like he's not just he wants mutant supremacy. It's not just that he doesn't trust humanity or whatever.
no,
Yeah.
Because
no,
like there's the whole
sure.
thing. There's the whole thing in the first one where like Wolverine very aptly points out like, hey, if you were really all about this cause, then you would be killing yourself, not Rogue, by doing this thing. And then like there's the whole thing where like Mystique loses her powers and he's just like, well, you're dog shit now. Who cares about you? You're not you used to be so beautiful, right? So there's like this whole, he has always been kind of full of shit. But I agree with you in the sense in these movies where he does just like immediately reverse for the sake of the plot of the movie
That's what I
whatever he
Yeah.
learned
mean.
at the
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what I mean when because in the it's consistent in the original series of films that like he has these beliefs and opinions, right? The thing
Yeah.
that makes it compelling is that we understand why he has them. He's just wrong, right? To be a
Right.
species supremacist, right? Like, but we understand why he feels that way. That's what's compelling about it. But the fact that he feels that way is consistent. Whereas in
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
prequel ones, we keep having like his notions be strongly challenged and him go, "Oh wow, yeah, maybe I am wrong. I'll help you save the day. Anyway, I'm gonna go back to being a bad guy now because I was right the whole time, guys."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of pulls all the actual character out of him. Like he doesn't
Mhm.
follow the chain of thought that we know Magneto is supposed to have.
And it sucks because
Yeah.
Michael Fassbender is clearly acting up a storm. Like,
Yes, he
Yeah.
is. But they
he
just
does
he's
get
he is
Magneto's
such a good
drama to a
casting
He
T.
does.
as young
Yeah.
Magneto.
He
I
has
mean,
the flair.
Mm-hmm.
He has the raw dramatic appeal.
Mm-hmm.
He has the cape.
He
Yeah.
has the cape and the
Yes, he
helmet.
has the cape.
It is hard to just
That
talk about
fucking
one
gay little
X-Man
cape, I love
film.
it so much.
And
Yeah.
I
It
think
really
it's
is.
particularly difficult with this one, given that it's
Mhm.
so central to all of the X-Men films.
It's the
Yeah.
core premise of it. You
Um,
can't disconnect it because it's like the whole like
yeah.
mission statement of it is to like
Connect them all.
Do
Yeah.
you,
connect them all and allow it to move in a different
does
way.
anyone
So
have some other things they specifically wanted to bring up, positive, negative, interesting about the film? Or any kind of last
uh,
thoughts on it?
I mean,
It's
I will
fun.
say again, similar to not in the way that you might be thinking, but similar to what I said last time. Uh, the scene with Quicksilver doing his slow
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
thing is still
It's
very
fun.
cool.
So
It still
fun.
doesn't make a ton of sense, but it's still very cool, and it makes
I'm
more
into
So
sense
it.
in this
fun.
one than it did last time. I
Yes.
will
Yeah.
say,
And also
but
in this one, the writers had the good sense to go, we probably shouldn't have this character involved in the rest of the plot because he'll just
yeah,
Yeah.
solve everything.
Yeah.
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 And he sure
Um,
would have.
but then
But
in the
they had him, they used him, and it was good and
It
it
was
was
a
yeah,
fun.
it
fun
was a
2
really cool
minutes.
scene. It was very well put together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
I do
fun.
like that in his Quicksilver scenes, they consistently use, like, nods at physics instead of just
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I'm just gonna move something," or, "I'm just gonna, like, do
yeah. It's
something."
not.
They have
It's
him,
Yeah,
not
like,
like
like when
punch
he,
a
like,
guard, like, punching
positions
themselves or just, like, tapping
yeah,
someone's face at super speed would, like,
yeah.
send
make
them
them fall
flying.
over.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
like
it's
perfectly
fun.
consistent though,
No, no,
because he
no,
does move
absolutely
their
it is
arms around and like
it
their
is
skin doesn't fly
absolutely
off or
not
whatever.
consistent at all, but it is
Yeah.
fun.
But it's
Yeah,
like no superhero piece of media that like has a super speed person.
yeah.
It
Yeah,
can be fully accurate to physics because
right.
anytime they touch someone, that person like going
Yeah,
at
That
super
person's
speed,
dead.
like
I'm always of the
you
firm
know,
belief that like if you're doing super speed, you have to add some sort of extra like mystical element to it
If
that
you gotta
explains
have the Speed Force, yeah.
yeah, you gotta have
Yeah,
something like the
yeah,
Speed Force. Otherwise, it's just like I mean, even
and
your own
sentient
body
other,
wouldn't
yeah.
handle like
Well, so
stopping.
like,
Your brain would slam against your
yeah,
skull or whatever.
so
Like
even if the idea
yeah.
is
Or
that
just,
like
like, the heat,
It's like you just have
included,
to
generated from
suspend
moving
the
that fast.
disbelief,
even
The
if like
generated from you
included
moving
in
that
the
fast would
power
burn
is
through
like
everything.
personal protection from the high speeds, it's like
right,
Yeah,
anything you run by, like you're gonna break all the windows on the ground
sound
Yeah.
floor whenever you're
barrier.
you'll
running on a
set the
street.
It's
Like,
just like
you'll
you
set the grass
just
on
have
fire.
to like ignore
He'd
science
he'd
as
go
part of
through
like
a lot of
being
pants.
okay with it,
Yeah,
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's a lot
he would go
to
through a lot
deal
of
with.
pads.
He would
All
go
right.
through a
yeah.
lot of pants. He would rub through a lot of thighs on a lot of pants.
It would set on
Um,
fire before then.
That's part of it.
And
Yeah.
if he was gonna run in such a way that he wouldn't like destroy his clothes, he would look kind of like how Ezra Miller runs in the Justice
Yeah.
League
Oh
movie,
my
where
god.
he's like flailing his limbs around. Like,
Yeah.
Odd choices.
I will
all
also
right,
say
Mhm.
this is almost unrelated.
yeah,
I
yeah,
would love to have not have them kill Darwin and have a scene between Sentinels and Darwin because that would be cool as shit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just, like, adapting back and forth at each other would be a lot of
We'll
fun.
we'll talk about the Darwin
We'll talk about
problem
Darwin.
when we
I
get to
know.
The
first class.
the
I
Darwin
it's like
problem.
such a
Yeah.
it's not even related because it's not, it's so out of the realm of what actually happened in these movies, but I just
Yeah.
think it would be a cool fucking scene, and
It
it's
would be
a
cool, yeah.
sad
Like
missed
to have him fight
opportunity.
the future ones, the
Yeah.
adaptive ones. Yeah, it would be
Yeah,
good.
it'd be
Oh,
fucking cool.
also, yeah. Why didn't they just use the portals to cut the Sentinels in half? In the
Yeah.
After they established she could, yeah.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
because like before they like
Consistency.
established that she could do that, it was just like it's not even a thought that crosses your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then
I
they're
think they
like,
struggle a lot with
"Hey, she does it," and you're like, "Oh shit!" Well, maybe she's just now learning that, right? That's fine. And then there's a later fight scene, and it's like, "Wait a minute, hold on."
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, some of
Because
them
they
is
don't
like,
like
well, they do move
adapt
really
to her
fast.
power. They just hit her better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like changed their tactics to beat her. Yeah,
which I
Yeah.
feel like would have been fine,
If they
overwhelmed by
hadn't established
force.
that she could cut them in half.
But, like, even having them do that, like, they could have done a scene where they just overwhelm her by sheer number. She
Mm-hmm.
can only make so many portals, but they didn't do that.
Yeah.
Because they
I
really
mean,
had to
Anyway.
prove that
X-Men:
these
Days
things
of
were an
Future
unbeatable
Past.
threat, even to the person that they proved could beat them.
Well, I mean, like, to be fair, right? Like,
They all took
because
down
they
some
show,
of
like,
them.
Storm taking some of them down, but then
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
It's
like,
just that there's a
Magneto.
lot of them.
there's too many of them and they get her,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I mean, like, some
One
of
of them
those
just sneaks up and stabs her.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because
just didn't
otherwise,
do it
how
they
are
just
they
didn't
gonna
do
get
it
her?
very
She's
well.
Storm.
Yeah, she's pretty
They
strong.
could
She's
have
one of the
done some
strongest, X-Men, right?
She's the avatar of the storm.
At least one of the
they could have done
strongest,
with
like,
some better
popular
fight
ones. I know there's, like, some
choreography.
small characters in X-Men who, like, control, like, reality itself or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
And Darwin is one of those sometimes.
Fuck. We're
Yeah.
gonna have to
yeah.
we'll get to Darwin.
Yeah.
Christ.
All
We
right.
can't let Darwin distract us
So,
now.
We can. He's
He's
not
gonna
in this
distract
movie.
us a lot later.
He's
I
not in this movie, but he should be, because he should be
Yeah.
alive.
All right, I am very interested to see what also I feel like I have been neglecting to say this when we do the discussions about the films. That's my bad. But the movies that we watched tonight, Days of Future Past was seeded 13 in its bracket and Swamp Thing was 20
Oh,
That's
Maybe
interesting.
just a
based
lot of
on
this
the
had to
like
do with Swamp
preliminary
Thing.
polling.
Yeah, I was under the impression I had not seen Swamp Thing, and I was under the impression that it was very bad based on things that I'd heard. So I seated it very low.
Yeah,
for my
yeah.
personal thing.
No,
yeah.
for sure.
Man, I wish you hadn't said because I was kind of hoping for a surprise upset.
Oh, sorry. I mean, I have no idea how this is gonna go. I'm actually really excited.
Yeah, I'm voting for Swamp Thing.
Okay.
I absolutely did like it more. Dated movie making techniques and all. I very much like it. I don't think it aged particularly poorly outside of the wipes. The rubber suits were a little, they're rubber suits, but I watched a lot of Power Rangers as a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
I really liked it. I liked the James Bond villain. I liked that everybody had a clear motivation that they followed through. Either they were greedy or they wanted immortality or they just wanted to do science. The characters were established and consistent, even though, they didn't really grow, but they didn't need to. That's not the story they were telling. It was a fun monster flick. And I think that it was very true to being a comic book with the pacing of it, with the structure of the story. I've said more about Swamp Thing than I think I have in my vote for any other film. I really want
Yeah.
Swamp Thing to win.
All right. Moving on.
To you, because I didn't watch the first one.
Oh shoot, yeah, I forgot you showed up late.
I don't get to vote.
Oh man, I'm so glad that
I was
there's
at
an
work.
odd number of people voting. I'm kind of in line with Ben here. I'm gonna vote for Swamp Thing. I had a good time watching it, and yeah, I really did appreciate that there was a certain level of consistency to the writing. I won't go as in depth as Ben. Also, side note that I didn't bring up during the discussion, I like that like most of the evil henchmen had names.
Yeah,
that-
no, that was I
Yeah.
appreciated that.
I thought that was kind of nice.
I mean, there was no Quetch.
Yeah.
There was no
Also,
Quetch.
wait, we didn't talk
Quetch
about this
is,
at all, but I fucking love the well, wait, is he with Tyrone? No, he just shot Tyrone. Oh yeah.
Maybe Danny's with Tyrone. Danny just shot Tyrone. He's not with Tyrone. It's great. It's so good. Okay, I don't need to gush about Swamp
All
Thing
right, so
because
that's,
I don't think that it's a
So
masterpiece of a film. I just did very
I'm
much
voting for
enjoy it.
Swamp Thing. I did enjoy Days of Future Past, but not. It's got so much baggage. It's hard for me to feel
Yeah.
like it was better.
Oh boy, my turn.
has a real
I'm
choice
gonna
to make.
I'm gonna vote for Days of Future Past.
Fair,
I
dude, fair.
enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than Swamp Thing. I honestly, real talk,
Probably
I
'cause you
think I
shut
might
us
not be a
out.
Wes Craven fan.
Have you
Oh.
seen
Yeah.
his like big works?
I have, and I
Wait, you
I
don't
just
like Scream, dude.
I haven't watched it in a while, so I'm gonna have to rewatch some of that.
You gotta
But,
find a
like,
Joe Bob with
Man,
Scream.
between like Hills Have Eyes that we watched not that long ago and this,
Yeah.
I'm thinking it might not be for me.
You didn't like The Hills Have
fair.
Eyes?
I also
It
didn't
was
like
fine.
Hills
I
Have
just-
Eyes.
I
you know.
love the Hills.
All
Have
right,
Eyes.
this is not the venue.
This is not
We're
this
not
is
talking
not the
about
discussion
that.
for this. But I just think Days of Future Past was a lot more enjoyable for me, and I would much rather watch that again.
I think that's totally fair.
Yeah, that's fine. Like, I wouldn't say that either of these movies are really fantastic. I think that there's a lot of good stuff in Days of Future Past, but there's also a lot of baggage to it. Whereas there might not be as many good things in Swamp Thing as there are in Days of Future Past, but there's no real downside, like it's just kind of an inoffensive movie at the end of the day. And there are a few things in it that I do really like Jude as a character, and just like a couple lines here and there that really send me. I will say it is a bit of a slog. Sometimes, I'm willing to forgive like these big kind of baggagey or problems with movies if they're like really fun otherwise. But I actually, rewatching it, Days of Future Past for me doesn't have as many like really fun moments as I remember it having the first time I watched it. So it's sort of just like there's not enough there that's like really entertaining to me to overpower all of the like really crippling baggage that it has for me, with like it
Mm.
being the linchpin of like all of the things that I really dislike about the X-Men movies in general. And then also within its own narrative, having a lot of things that I find very difficult to get past. So I
Mm.
think my vote's got to go to Swamp Thing because Jude, pretty much.
Jude, man.
Oh my god, Jeff, you've just made my night.
Uh,
You're
well,
allowed to vote for the one that lost.
no, I know this is genuinely an incredibly tough decision
Yeah,
for
this
me.
has
Yeah,
been a really
sounds like-
close
Um,
one.
Evie's on
Like,
the opposite end of the spectrum for
I-
me, where it sounds like you really like both of them a whole
Yeah,
lot, right?
I genuinely like, yes, there are problems, and I agree with a lot of the criticisms that all of you have levied against both films. Um, they're both really fun. And to me, that is the best thing that a film can do,
Mm.
is be fun. And
Yeah.
you
Especially when
know,
it's about superpowers and punching people really hard.
Yeah.
which, like, to be fair, both of these films are about. And
Yeah. Very much so.
it like, I'm vamping because I genuinely don't know what I'm gonna pick.
Flip
Like,
a coin. You'll decide in the air.
Helps. It doesn't matter that much 'cause
Yeah, I mean, we've already made
yeah, I mean,
decisions.
obviously, we
3 of
already have a
5.
winner. I think that I need to vote for Days of Future Past.
Nice.
I'm unsurprised, which is why I'm
Understandable.
so glad
Yeah.
that the one
So-
wild card vote went for Swamp Thing.
This is our first upset in the
it
bracket.
really is, and
This
it's for
Wow.
Swamp
This is
Thing.
the first
Yeah.
time a lower seeded film has
I think a-
beat a higher seeded film.
I think
I
it
think
maybe
that
deserves
Swamp
it.
Thing
a lot of us
probably
hadn't
should have
seen
been seated a little
Swamp
higher.
Thing.
wait, was I the wild card vote?
Yes.
But I spent the entire movie complaining
Yeah,
about X-Men
I
Days
think
of
we
Future
should have
Past.
known
I
that.
also
Yeah,
spent
to the
like,
point-
all of last week complaining about Days of Future Past.
to the point where I had, and we haven't mentioned this during recording, but to the point where I deafened myself on Discord for the past 45,
Bro,
the last 45 minutes, because it was
it's-
just a cacophony
It was
of
a
the
lot, yeah.
5 of you yelling about Days
Sorry.
of Future Past.
I'm
It's
sorry.
so hard to not talk about X-Men. Like,
Yeah,
so
I-
hard.
I've been having this entire conversation for like a decade now with Eddie, and it's like
Almost,
we
yeah.
always say the same things, but I never don't feel as passionately about
Hey,
it.
Chris, you're echoing.
Oh, sorry.
oh man.
So I apologize.
Nah, it's I think it's chill. Well, yeah, that I think this, I don't know if it was as close as Ultron and Amazing Spider-Man, but like it was close for like different reasons, and I had way more fun watching both movies.
Yeah.
They're both, there's a lot to say about both of these movies, one way
yeah,
or the
Yeah.
other.
I would
Yeah.
recommend checking out Swamp Thing, and I would not recommend against rewatching Days of Future Past.
Yeah.
if for nothing else, it can start a lot of conversations.
Yeah.
You
All
do get to
right.
see Hugh Jackman
Yeah.
fast, and that's
You
Oh,
do.
Hugh Jackman, but yeah, that
Yeah,
I should have
almost
voted
forgot
for
about
Before-
Jackman.
before we-
That's
before we
Bare
get-
ass.
Before we close the recording, I do want to say Hugh Jackman is
Canada's
fucking
best.
flawless at acting dazed and confused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
He
mean,
is so perfect at it.
he has always been an incredible Wolverine.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he just does the character so well.
And
Which is good, since
you
he's
know,
played him
Chris,
so many times.
don't worry,
Yeah.
we only have 8 more X-Men movies to hear me complain about nonstop.
And outro. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you did enjoy it and like the concept of this series, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel so you can see when new episodes drop. If you have any thoughts about Swamp Thing or about X-Men Days of Future Past, please leave them in the comments below. I'd be very happy to read what you have to say and to respond to you down there. Next month, I am going to be releasing a Christmas video that has absolutely nothing to do with superhero movies, so hopefully you'll still want to check that out. But as for this video, that should be about it. Thank you once again for watching. Goodbye.